and welcome to this Outbeat Extra. I'm Greg Moralia. Well, this month, many LGBT students will head off to college and perhaps to a new school. Our first guest has some very helpful advice. Shane Windmeyer is the executive director of Campus Pride, the nation's leading LGBT advocacy organization that works with colleges and universities to make them safer and more accepting places for LGBT students. And then later in the show, we'll introduce you to filmmaker Ron Rogers, who just released a documentary about local singer-songwriter Bobby Jo Valentine. You've heard Bobby Jo's music on our shows for many months now. Ron will be here with Stephen Ashton from the Wine Country Film Festival in Kenwood, and he'll be talking about the film and its upcoming showing at the festival. All of this is coming up right after your Outbeat Radio News for this Sunday, August 31st, 2014.
I have found Outbeat Radio News, your source for LGBT news from the North Bay and beyond.
In Chicago this week, federal appeals judges bristled Tuesday at arguments defending gay marriage bans in Indiana and Wisconsin, with one Republican appointee comparing them now to defunct laws that once outlawed weddings between blacks and whites. Attorneys general in both states are trying to reinstate bans that were ruled unconstitutional this last June. The outcome of the case could also directly affect hundreds of couples who were married after federal judges overturned the bans, but before their rulings were put on hold pending appeal. Judge Richard Ponzer, who was appointed by President Ronald Reagan, was dismissive when Wisconsin Attorney General Timothy Samuelson repeatedly pointed to tradition as the underlying justification for barring gay marriage. The judge responded with, quote, "It was tradition to not allow blacks and whites to marry, a tradition that got swept away," he said. Prohibition of same-sex marriage is a tradition of hate and savage discrimination. He frequently cut off Indiana Solicitor General Thomas Fisher just moments into his presentation and chided him to answer his questions. At one point, Posner ran through a list of psychological strains of unmarried same-sex couples, including having children struggle to grasp why their schoolmates' parents were married and theirs were not. Posner said, "What horrible stuff. What benefits society to bar gay marriage?" In Portland, Oregon this week, a federal appeals court has dismissed the National Organization for Marriage's effort to appeal an Oregon court ruling that allows same-sex marriage. The Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals issued its decision this last Wednesday. Several same-sex couples sued the state of Oregon last year, arguing that the ban on same-sex marriage is unconstitutional. Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum refused to defend it and joined the couples in asking a U.S. District Court Judge Michael McShane to throw it out. The National Organization for Marriage, which opposes same-sex unions, asked to offer a defense on behalf of its members in Oregon, but the judge ruled they lacked standing to intervene in the case. The group appealed, but a three-judge panel dismissed their case in Wednesday's ruling. And here in California, the State Assembly approved Assembly Bill 2501, a bill that prevents defendants from escaping murder charges by claiming they panicked when they discovered that someone was gay or transgender. Current law allows murder charges to be reduced to manslaughter if the killing happened in a sudden quarrel or in the heat of passion. Assembly Bill 2501 by Democratic Assemblywoman Susan Bonilla of Concord would bar defendants from using their victim's gender or sexual orientation to support a so-called panic defense. Bonilla says such defenses legalize violence against lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. The Bar Association urged governments to curtail the use of panic defenses, and the gay rights group Equality California says California would have the first statewide prohibition. The State Assembly approved AB 2501 by a vote of 50-10. The legislation now heads to the governor for signature. And here locally, Art for Life, a benefit for Face-to-Face, ending HIV in Sonoma County, will happen on Saturday, September 6th at the Sebastopol Center for the Arts from 2 to 6 p.m. This is the 27th year for Art for Life, and this event has raised more than $2 million for people living with HIV/AIDS. What began in 1988 in response to the AIDS epidemic in the county has grown to a much-anticipated annual event to benefit care services for the more than 600 men, women, and children living in Sonoma County with HIV and AIDS. Everyone is invited to experience this exemplary exhibit of local art, food, and wine. There'll be about 200 works available for purchase, including original paintings, photography, pottery, drawing, sculpture, and jewelry. Tickets are $75 a person and available now online at www.f2f.org. There will also be a free public exhibit on Friday, September 5th from noon to 3, where you can check out and select your favorite pieces while planning your bid for Saturday's silent auction. This is one of my favorite events, and I hope that you'll join me there. You can learn more about Face-to-Face and Art for Life, again, by going to their website at www.f2f.org. For a complete calendar of LGBT events happening this week in the North Bay, go to gaysonoma.com. And if you have news or an event you'd like to share with our listeners, tell us about it by going to our own website at outbeatnews.com. Be sure to follow us all week long on Facebook and Twitter for the latest LGBT news and information from here in the North Bay and beyond. For Gary Carnavelli, I'm Greg Morelia.
Outbeat Radio News, your source for LGBT news from the North Bay and beyond.
If you're an LGBT student heading off to college this fall, our first guest has some helpful advice for you. Shane Windmeyer is the Executive Director of Campus Pride, the nation's leading LGBT advocacy organization for colleges and universities. Shane's been somewhat of a regular here on Outbeat Radio, and I'm thrilled to have him back again with us tonight. Shane, welcome back to Outbeat Radio.
It's great to be here, Greg.
Well, this has become sort of an annual conversation for us as students return back to school, high school and college, and so it's always great to check in with you. And Campus Pride just published its list of the most LGBT-friendly colleges and universities in the country. Tell us about this list and the criteria used to create it.
Sure. Every year for back to school, Campus Pride does a best of the best college campus list. And this year we actually expanded the list beyond just the top 25 to the top 50 LGBT-friendly campuses. And we decided to do that because more and more campuses are competing and trying to improve their LGBT programs and services. And so we've seen more competition, and with the more competition, it gets closer and closer amongst the top 25. And so we decided to do a larger list, and so we published our top 50 this year for the first time. And we have a number of different types of campuses. The data that the list is based on is actually through our Campus Pride Index, which is an online benchmarking tool that is based in research around LGBT best practices for college campuses. And so it looks at about 55 different policies, programs, and practices to be inclusive of LGBT students. And colleges basically self-assess. They self-assess how inclusive they are based on this tool, and it gives them a star rating, but also gives them a percentage score on the backside that we use in this top 50 list to be able to determine which of the campuses are in the top 50 this year, and realizing that all the campuses that are participating in the Campus Pride Index are doing good work because they're coming out as LGBT friendly. They want to become better. It's the campuses that are not part of the Campus Pride Index that, we, in many ways, tell people to be concerned about or to ask the question of why aren't they part of the list. So, there's right now 425 plus campuses that are part of the Campus Pride Index. So we encourage everyone to go check all of them out.
Great. And so are these mostly four-year schools, or are there some community colleges there too?
Yeah, there are amongst the 425 plus campuses, there are 2-year campuses, 4-year campuses, public and private institutions, women's colleges, some religiously affiliated campuses, historically black colleges and universities, other minority-serving institutions. So there's a real good diversity amongst the campuses that participate in the Campus Pride Index. It's probably not a surprise to you or to some of your listeners that the campuses that are in the top 50 tend to be from, largely progressive, LGBT-inclusive places such as, California, New York, the Northeast, the Northwest. We do have a few southern campuses that are in the top 50, but they tend to be private campuses such as Tulane University or Emory University, which, a private campus in the South is able to create kind of their own rules compared to some of the public campuses in southern communities or, the 2-year campuses. So there definitely is this this dichotomy of campuses related to the top 50, being where we've spent most of our energy as a movement is in these liberal, progressive places. And so, Campus Pride is really trying our best to target rural and southern campuses to try to bring them up to where the top 50 campuses are.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that there are several in California. And if I recall right, UC Berkeley and Stanford were among the top.
That's correct. Several of the UC campuses were in the top 50, along with Stanford. USC, University of Southern California, has long been in our top list. So there's some wonderful campuses right there in your backyard who have always been, actually, not just recently, but who have always been kind of leading the way when it comes to LGBT inclusive policy programs and practices.
Mm-hmm. So you said earlier that the index, identifies certain benchmarks, measurements, if you will, that are based on research. Give us a sense of a campus like UC Berkeley or USC or Stanford, as you mentioned. What have they done that stands them out from the rest? Well, give us an idea of some of the things that they have that maybe the other colleges don't.
Sure. So, when it comes to kind of the best of the best, we're really talking about campuses that are doing as much as they can around trans issues. For instance, they have health insurance for students and their employees that allows for transition-related or hormone therapies for students or employees who need them, such as transgender individuals. The campus has a mentor-mentee program to help retain LGBT students during the academic 4 years of the individual. So it helps with retention efforts of out LGBT students. When it comes to looking at institutional commitment, the campus has a LGBT staff person or an office, a center that is responsible for making sure LGBT issues are at the forefront of the campus. Many times these campuses have courses, an academic major or a minor in LGBT studies or in sexual and gender studies related to LGBT people. These campuses have gender-inclusive housing for trans-identified students to feel safe where they live. Those are some of the examples amongst the 55 questions that are a little bit more of a challenge for campuses that are in parts of the country that maybe don't have resources like California does or hasn't had the level of awareness when it comes to some of the trans issues quite yet, and are still learning or are still trying to identify how do we create gender-inclusive housing when my campus doesn't even understand who a trans person is today. And so, I think the California schools that we mentioned, like Stanford, they've been dealing with these issues and have made an institutional commitment that goes beyond just having out students or out faculty and staff. They actually have policies and programs in health insurance and housing, in recruitment and recruiting LGBT students or retaining them once they're in college.
Mm-hmm. Great. So as you looked at that list of 50, were there any new colleges on there that, perhaps surprised you or that stood out that made, some real advances this last year?
Nothing really surprises me these days when it comes to LGBT-friendly campuses or as I like to look at, LGBT-inclusive campuses. There are campuses all across the country, even in kind of what I call these brave spaces where it's hard to be out and LGBT still today. Emory University in Atlanta, to me, it's not a surprise because Atlanta is kind of this bubble of LGBT progress, but, they are in the South. They're in Georgia. That is a surprise to some people. Tulane University being in, Louisiana, but then again, they're within New Orleans and they're a private campus like Emory. Some people are surprised by Indiana University being in the state of Indiana, which is still a very challenging climate when it comes to LGBT individuals. But I think you can find that. I mean, some people would argue somewhere in the state of California there are challenging environments to being LGBT. So I think those places are everywhere. What I'm really pleased about is that campuses today want to be called gay-friendly or, LGBT-friendly. The question becomes for those campuses, how do they do it? What path, what journey, do they need to go on in order to truly be LGBT-friendly?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the bigger question.
Sure. Well, and looking here locally, of course, I have to brag about where I work at Napa Valley College. We participate on the index, and frankly, that index helped us look at how we could be more supportive of LGBT students. It led us to expand our policies and make them more inclusive. It led to some conversations about making sure we have sets of gender-neutral bathrooms located around the campus. It led us to create a safe space program, an LGBT book section in our library, and, of course, our LGBT studies program. But I also have to say that Santa Rosa Junior College here in Sonoma County is starting to have conversations around this. And, of course, we're going to be doing a Stop the Hate Training for Trainers program with Campus Pride here in California at Santa Rosa JC in Petaluma. So, it's great to see even our local two-year colleges are starting to get involved and really doing something meaningful for LGBT students. Let's shift gears to the Princeton Review's list of colleges and various aspects about colleges. I think they published a list that talked about the most unfriendly LGBT college. What does that look like for you? What makes a college particularly unfriendly for LGBT students?
What I find problematic about the Princeton Review list is really the methodology. Campus Pride with our list doesn't pretend that we've asked all the students on campus to identify, which campus is LGBT friendly. We're merely looking at policy, program, and practice. And so there are limits to our list. But where I really have a problem with the Princeton Review in calling a campus unfriendly or the most friendly is that their methodology is really, skewed in that it's asking all the students on the campus basically one question that deals with LGBT issues. And the question is something to the effect of, do you believe in LGBT equality? And based on that one question, they determine whether a campus is LGBT friendly. They don't ask more than that question. They don't even break down of the students who answered the question who identified as LGBT, because they don't ask a demographic question to understand, is a student heterosexual or homosexual or bisexual, how they identify.
Mm-hmm.
So that rating is purely commercial, and it's based on one question. From Campus Pride's perspective, we want to highlight the positive campuses, the campuses that are doing great work. And so we focus on the campuses that are the best of the best. And we focus on policy, program, and practice. The only way we can determine from a student experience standpoint if a campus is truly LGBT friendly is to ask, I would say, maybe 10, questions around LGBT experience. And I would ask those of the LGBT students. I wouldn't be asking the straight students like the Princeton Review does, whether or not a campus is gay friendly, because at the end of the day, it's the gay students or the trans students who should be determining that. And so, our focus is to focus on the positive. I think the challenge with us is that there are clearly campuses out there that have policies against gay students or against transgender students. And those campuses, we've actually, the ones that have got the Title IX exemptions recently, George Fox University, they won't allow a transgender student to live in campus housing in a way that would be safe for that trans student. There are other campuses out there who've recently got a Title IX exemption who don't want to have LGBT students even on their campus as out students. There's Bob Jones University has long had a history, Liberty University. So the campuses that don't even allow LGBT students to be there are obviously the most, unfriendly in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I just heard a story about Brigham Young University. And it was a story about how in their bookstore, in the Hallmark rack, quote-unquote, mistakenly, some same-sex marriage cards were installed on those racks. And they went to great lengths to explain that the bookstore staff isn't responsible for stocking the cards. It's Hallmark that does that, and that they were immediately removed because that college does not condone, support, or acknowledge same-sex relationships. And I thought, what a powerful, negative, horrible message that sends to their LGBT students.
Well, it does. And there's even worse examples than the one that you shared. And I find it particularly challenging for any student to go to school where another student or one of their friends doesn't feel safe. And what's happening today, in my opinion, is that, young people are they want to go to campuses where they can, feel affirmed, where their friends can feel safe. And we live in a society where there are many young people who have gay friends or who have transgender friends. And, these campuses that are, creating these religious rules that are really defining, in many regards, religion from a viewpoint of hate and of bias, I think they're going to be struggling as they, continue down this path of exclusion.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. You just got done with the annual Campus Pride LGBT Leadership Camp. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so, Camp Pride is in its 8th year. We have had a number of successes every year that we have camp. This year, Janet Mock was our featured speaker and received a Voice in Action Award from our organization for her dedication to trans youth of color, particularly trans women of color. And so that was pretty exciting. We had Wade Davis, a former NFL football player, there. But most importantly, we had over 120 young adults and some advisors who work with those young adults, at the camp. And it's a social justice camp. So we're not just talking about, queer identity and being lesbian, gay, bi, or trans, but we're talking about intersectionality and intersectional justice, and how we view our entire whole self, not just our LGBT self. And so it's very empowering. We, next year, I can't believe it will be 9 years that we've done this leadership camp, and every year it continues to grow. And so, it's exciting.
So where did most of these students come from? Were they mostly from the East Coast and South? Because you hold in Nashville, right?
Yeah, actually, we had some students from UC Santa Cruz who attended. I think 3 students actually from Santa Cruz came to camp. So we get students from California. We get students from Washington State, from Nevada. So they come from all over. The camp is currently held in Nashville. Next year, we're thinking about moving it to Charlotte, North Carolina, to our home base. But, we're constantly surprised at the number of students and the places where these students come. We have scholarships. So some of these young adults, for instance, we had scholarships for students from Colorado, specifically to come to camp. We had some scholarships for students from the Northwest, from Idaho and Montana and Wyoming to come to camp. We got a grant actually from the David Bonnet Foundation, which is right there in California, to help us get students from historically black colleges and universities, specifically to give them funding to come to camp. So we had 17 historically black HBCU campuses at camp this year, which was really exciting. So a lot of different campuses, a lot of diversity when it comes to our young adults. We have a number of trans-identified young people who come to camp, gender nonconforming, gender queer students. So it's a very safe place, and it's one of the best programs, and I feel very fortunate to be part of it.
Fantastic. So where do people go to learn more about the camp specifically?
Yeah, so our website is campuspride.org, and the camp page that has all the details is just campuspride.org/camppride.
Great.
And you can find it right there on the homepage, along with tons of other resources, as you know, Stop the Hate, our fraternity and sorority out in Greek, Lambda 10 program, our speakers bureau, which we have a number of speakers listed there. We actually just added a campus pride map where you can find student groups across the country that are LGBT at different campuses, as well as a scholarship database if you're looking for scholarships to go to college.
Awesome. Well, if you missed that website, we'll have it on our own website at outbeatnews.com so that you can go and check that out. Talk about the type of student then, or participant, I should say, that's going to come to a camp. Could it be a high school student, or do they need to be over 18?
Yeah, they do have to be 18 or above. They can be a high school student and be 18, right? So we want to have, sadly because of laws and so forth, we have to be careful with anyone under 18. So we've just decided to be 18 and above. They could be a freshman or a freshman entering college. We have a variety of people who are even older than the traditional college age who come to camp as well. So as long as they're 18 and above and realize that this is a collegiate, campus-based camp, that's what's most important.
Mm-hmm. And how much does something like that cost? It's a week-long program, right?
Yeah, it's a week long, and it covers all the food. So you have 3 meals a day. We have snacks and ice cream and pizza in the nighttime, and we have housing, so it includes your housing and your bedding and things like that. So it's right about $900 roughly. We do have an early bird rate that will go online starting in October, where you can actually get it for as low as $750. So the best time to actually purchase your camp registration is between October 1st and December 15th, because you can get the lowest rate, at that's about $750 roughly, and then it just keeps going up as you get closer to camp. So, the best advice is to register early, and get your spot at camp before, hopefully, before it sells out.
Fantastic. Well, this month is obviously a back-to-school month for an awful lot of students, which is primarily why we always like to get together with you at this time. So give us some advice for those LGBT students who are freshmen in college. Maybe they're going away to college, leaving home for the first time. They arrive on campus. What are their first steps? Aside from the normal kinds of getting settled in, as an LGBT student, what do you recommend as their first steps?
I think, find your own passion, what you care about. Obviously, your first priority should always be your classes and academics, and making sure that whoever's paying for you to go to college, if it's yourself or if it's your parents or other scholarships or other members of your family, you're there to get an education. So make sure that's your first priority. Then find, things that you care about, what you're passionate about. Is that volunteering? Is that being on the programming board? If that's, being part of some intramural recreational club or sport, and start putting out, your own, time and effort to these organizations, and get involved, stay engaged with your campus, and try to find ways that you can be visible as you feel comfortable with being out. And there's tons of ways to stay involved with Campus Pride. If you would like to get involved with us nationally, or if we can just help you, if there's some way that we can help you in that first year on campus. I think from what I tell many students every year, this is an exciting time to grow and to learn. Take advantage of the opportunities around you to meet people. It's always important to have friends, and so take some time to meet some new folks. If you have people there that create a support network so you have people you can rely on, and don't be afraid of meeting new people, because that's what college is all about.
Mm-hmm. Do you think college is a good time if you're not out or you haven't been able to come out at home? Do you think college is a good time to do it if that's what you want?
Oh, definitely. You always want to consider your own safety and what you feel comfortable with, and make sure that the people you tell can respect the fact that maybe you're not out at home, and consider what that might mean if somebody should accidentally say something, if your family or your parent should be visiting. So you always want to keep those things in mind, but at the same time, I think college is a great place to come out, especially if you found your campus to be safe and welcoming.
Mm-hmm. So talk about the dorm situation a little bit. I know that the housing arrangement can always be challenging. Hopefully colleges have sort of looked at this. So if you're not out, is that a responsibility you have to tell your dorm mate, or what's the best way of approaching that situation?
Yeah, so I think it varies. I think it depends on how you feel, the trust level you feel with your roommate, and how he or she responds to kind of LGBT topics. I think it's important to not assume that someone's going to be anti-LGBT, but also not assume that they're going to be okay with it either. The good news is if you should have some negative interactions with your roommate, if they find out that you're gay, or if you tell them, your RA, your housing folks, will find you a new roommate or another place to stay, but you shouldn't have to deal with that. I really try to get students to identify early on their housing situation and make sure it's someone that they're going to feel comfortable with in their housing, or to talk to the campus about LGBT, living learning communities, or a place where that you're going to feel safe and welcome. It really depends on each individual student as to what experience they want, and if the college has options for roommate matching for an LGBT friendly roommate, or has living learning communities.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like colleges are making a lot of headway around sexual orientation as a variation with students, but for trans students, I think we still have a lot more work to go. From your experience, talk about some of the real challenges that are out there in many colleges for transgender students that are perhaps unique to that community.
I've said repeatedly that I think we're living in the 1950s, 1960s when it comes to trans students and trans issues. The campuses, as we mentioned earlier in the program, around Campus Pride's Top 50 list or the Campus Pride Index, those campuses by and large have gender identity and expression as part of their non-discrimination statement. Some of them have gender inclusive housing. Others have health insurance that's inclusive of trans students. But by and large, we're talking about maybe 13, 14% of colleges have a non-discrimination statement inclusive of of gender identity. About 20% have it inclusive of sexual orientation. So not every campus is going to be where it needs to be on trans issues, especially given the numbers and the fact that we still have a long way to go.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier Title IX. We know that the feds, have interpreted Title IX to include transgender students, but there's a way for a college to apply for an exemption, right?
Correct.
That's unfortunate. It just does not seem right. It's almost back in the days of the idea of desegregating schools, but allowing schools to apply for an exemption.
It is
desegregate.
It is extremely frustrating, and it really is a challenge to just basic safety of students, feeling safe and being safe within housing on a campus in general. There has always been a way to get an exemption from Title IX, but the case of George Fox's university is a perfect example of George Fox actually had an exemption around Title IX, and it was dealing with women who were pregnant with a child and were divorced or weren't married with their child, and they had an exemption to be able to, because of their religious beliefs, not allow that student or admittance into the campus. And so they no longer practice that belief system, even though I guess it was part of their belief system and then it went away. But it's a real challenge when we talk about religion and faith and we're able to discriminate in the name of that religion or faith when it comes to people and their lives. And those are the campuses that I think are the dinosaurs of, higher education, that at some point they will be extinct.
Well, let's hope so. Let's hope it happens tomorrow. For the high school student who's searching for an LGBT-friendly college, how do they begin their search? Well,
actually, Campus Pride has a page dedicated to prospective students around, what to ask about on your campus visit, to a personal inventory quiz to kind of figure out what you're looking for in a college campus, to a checklist that you can fill out related to, do you want to have a student group? Do you want to have LGBT courses? So we have some interactive kind of questionnaires on our website under the prospective students. For that purpose. We also have college fairs. So we're holding a college fair in LA, in Los Angeles, later this October. And we have a fair in a couple weeks in Roanoke, Virginia. We have a college fair in Boston. We have one in Nashville, Tennessee. We have one in Washington State up in Vancouver. So we host these in-person college fairs. And one of the exciting things this year is we partnered with GLSEN, the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, and we are hosting the first ever online virtual college fair. So it will happen all day on March the 19th, and colleges will be online, and there will be a series of Google Hangouts and interactions where young people can learn about college, learn about scholarships and financial aid, talk about testing services, whatever they need to be successful and to kind of make that transition from high school into college.
Very cool. And these college fairs that you're talking about are specifically for LGBT students. These are colleges that are coming forward saying, we want to recruit you.
Exactly. Just like Harvey Milk used to say, we're here to recruit you. That's what these colleges are there to do.
Great. And you mentioned the one in Los Angeles. That's probably the closest one for our listeners, at least on the West Coast. Do you have the dates for that?
Yeah, I do. But really the closest one would be the one right in front of your computer, right? For the March 19th virtual college fair. You don't have to go anywhere for that. So I encourage students, and it doesn't cost anything, so you can just log on March 19th for the virtual college fair, through Campus Pride. And then the one in LA is coming up here in October, and the date is October 11th. So it's on National Coming Out Day. That's Saturday, and it's actually held on the campus of University of Southern California. So USC, and it's from 11:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. And if you want to find out our full listing of college fairs, you just go to campuspride.org/college fair. So that's campuspride.org/college fair, and you're able to see the listing. You're able to RSVP for you and your family, whoever wants to come to the fair.
Great. And again, if you missed that website, we'll have it on our own website at outbeatnews.com. We've been talking with Shane Windmeyer, who's the Executive Director of Campus Pride. Thanks again for updating us on what's going on with colleges and universities. It's getting better and better every year, isn't it?
It sure is, and it's a great time. I mean, Back to Campus is full of excitement. There's so many, young, out, lesbian, gay, bi, trans, queer, and questioning students out there. And our role with Campus Pride is just to make it a safer place and to help students get the education that they need.
Excellent. Keep up the good work, Shane, and thanks again for spending your Sunday night with us.
All right, Greg. Take care.
We'll be back with more right after this. Here's local singer-songwriter Bobby Jo Valentine with his original song, Home.
We drop like falling stars, bare feet in cable cars, and we don't know who we are, but we're not trying to find out. We stare up at the sun, Look at the things we've done, and my heart is on the run, and it's not gonna stop now. Oh, but sometimes I wanna go home. 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 Yeah. We wear our doubts like skin. Look at the mess we're in. And I know somebody's gotta win, but I'm not trying to win now. Oh, but sometimes I wanna go home. 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 Like scars, scared that we've come this far, and we don't know who we are, or we're afraid to find out. Oh, but sometimes I want to go home. 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 Sometimes I want to go home.
And if you're just joining us, you're listening to Outbeat Extra on KRCB Windsor, Santa Rosa. I'm Greg Moralia, and that was local singer-songwriter Bobby Jo Valentine with his original song, Home. Well, last week I had a chance to attend a premiere of a documentary about Bobby Jo Valentine, created by filmmaker Ron Rogers. And he is here with us tonight to talk about the film. And he's also with Stephen Ashton from the Wine Country Film Festival, and he's here to talk about the festival and the showing of this new documentary at the film festival. Welcome to you both.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah.
Great to have you here. Ron, let's start with you. What drew you to Bobby Jo Valentine, and what prompted or inspired you to create a documentary about him?
Well, I heard Bobby Jo Valentine at the Mystic Theater in Petaluma, and one song that he sang was so powerful and meant so much to me that it just struck home on a very deep level. And I found that happens to a lot of people. And I liked the song so much that I wanted to use that song for another project. And so I bought the song from Bobby and used it. I then learned that Bobby was a very interesting guy, and so I interviewed him for another project. And then I realized that there really was a lot to Bobby. And so I decided and asked him if I could follow him around. And he told me that he had a 5-day, 8-concert tour all over California coming up. And I thought, well, that might be fun. You know, he's such a high-energy guy. I could lose a few pounds. I'll try to keep up with him for a while. And so the focus was, let's just show this, great, energetic guy. And then the more I spent time with him, the more I realized that he's had a very interesting and powerful background. And so the film evolved into not just the story of this tour, but the story of a very unique and powerful individual. And it just evolved into that.
And you created a documentary short, and the regulation is, what's the maximum length of a documentary short in film festival?
I believe that a documentary short is 40 minutes or less.
Okay.
And this is less than 40 minutes.
That had to be really tough. I mean, I can't imagine trying to tell the story of somebody's life in a full-length feature film. that would span a couple of hours. How are you able to pare this down into 20 minutes or so?
Well, I do have a ton of footage, but I did not attempt to show his entire life. But I did attempt to show that there were some pretty amazing things that did happen to him, and some important things happened during the filming. For example, he was adopted at 3 days old. He was raised by some very fundamental independent Baptist great parents. And then when he came out as gay, it caused trouble with the family and with the church, and he was able to maintain his identity as he discovered it. He also, during the filming, found his birth mother that he had not seen since he was 3 days old, and we were able to film the very first phone conversation he had with her, and we were able to film his very first meeting with her since he was 3 days old. And we also looked at his exploration of whether or not he could connect with audiences on such a deep level that he could start a new life as a professional singer-songwriter. And that was the basic question that he was trying to figure out during this tour. And I don't want to do a spoiler, but it was real interesting to see the reaction of all different types of audiences to Bobby's songwriting. He writes the songs and he performs them, and it's pretty amazing to see what happens.
Mm-hmm. So at the end of the documentary, as audiences walk away, what are some of the key points of his story that you hope that they leave with?
Well, the reaction I get is pretty much that this is a very unique individual. His message is basically hope. He's got a hopeful message. He's got an ability to write songs that people come up to him and say, "It sounds like you wrote this song not only for me, but for something I'm going through right now." Mm-hmm. And so the message we're getting is that it's real interesting, and we can learn from a young man, he's only 28 years old, who has been willing and able to be his own person no matter what the consequences, and take his message out and make a lot of people happy. It's an interesting story.
It most certainly is. What was it like for you in such an intimate moment to be there with cameras as he met his birth mom? I remember recalling the footage in the film and thinking about that. That's such a personal moment. It had to have been monumental for him. What was it like for you to be there?
It was chilling because it was reality as it was happening. My hairs were standing up on end, the hairs on my arms. It was just chilling. And it was amazing to me that not only was Bobby willing to open up his entire life to the camera, but his birth mother was open to an amazing conversation that they had the very first time on the phone, where she talked about why she gave Bobby up and all kinds of stuff. She was open. Bobby's adoptive parents were totally open. I interviewed them several times, and they were totally open. And so the only way that this emotion and this reality could come out was if people were willing to open themselves up, and they all were, not just Bobby, but all the other people. And it was lucky for me. The film couldn't have happened if it wasn't for that.
Yeah. Well, and I recall when he was on our show several years ago, sharing his coming out story. At the time, he was still pretty estranged from his adoptive parents because of some real differences in religious philosophy. And you said that they were very open about that with you?
Well, I believe what Bobby says and what I found is that they have met him part way and he has met them part way. Mm-hmm. They don't totally understand his journey, but they still love him, and it's obvious that they do, and he gets together with them on a regular basis. And they don't agree on everything, but they do have a good relationship, and he speaks very highly of them. So I think maybe things are a little different from back then, in the sense that they love each other and they regularly spend time with each other, mm-hmm. even though they don't agree on everything, and that's mm-hmm. for sure.
What a great example, of a family kind of working through that, because that piece at least is not entirely unique.
where religion plays such a big part in it, and it can really pull families apart, sometimes indefinitely. And so hopefully people will see this, and maybe it'll inspire them to have conversations with their kids and reconcile. What are your hopes for the documentary? You had a good showing at Santa Rosa Junior College, and I understand you got really good feedback. Where do you want to take it?
Well, that was a test screening for the funders to sort of get. We passed out audience reaction cards, and we got a lot of 10s, and we got a lot of good feedback from that, which was useful. But basically, I would like to send this movie out so that as many people as possible can see it, because I think Bobby's a very compelling person. I think his message is compelling, and I think it's an interesting story. And I think documentaries are great because, they start out as one thing and they end up being something else. But, the late, great Roger Ebert said that movies are a machine for creating empathy. Mm-hmm. And I think that movies like this do create empathy, and they do allow people to see people in situations that they otherwise wouldn't, and they can learn from it.
Right. Well, and of course, people have an opportunity to go and see the film coming up at the Wine Country Film Festival. Right. So, Stephen, you've been running this film festival for how long now?
This is the 28th year, yeah.
Wow, fantastic. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about it and talk about what drew you to include this particular film.
Well, the festival actually was founded, as they say, 28 years ago, and so we've had, from the very, very beginning, a notion that cinema actually has an opportunity for not only to be an expression as art, but also to help transform both the filmmaker and the audience. And so we have an expression where we say that film can bring forth new creative possibilities in each of us. And that's kind of in a nutshell the skew that we have for all of the films that we try to find. And in this particular case, Bobby Jo film is just right up our alley. It's a perfect example of the kind of film that we do look for, which is honest. It's compelling, telling the story of an individual, sharing a process that we can all gather something for ourselves from. And so, also, to be honest with you, this has got a whole kind of almost a 3-act structure. It's a real story. It's 20 minutes long, but you have, a process and a character that really goes through transformation in the process.
Right. And
so it really has all the dramatic impact of something that we look for. So it's a perfect kind of a movie, I think.
Yeah. And all of the venues for the film festival are based in and around Kenwood, right?
Yeah. We've kind of focused in on the heart of the valley, we call it.
Okay.
And so we're at Deerfield Ranch Winery, which has a beautiful Grand Room Theater, which is where the Bobby Jo film is going to be playing. On closing night of the festival, actually on September 22nd. And that's part of the wonderful closing night program that we have that includes a tribute to Johnny Winter and a brand new movie, Johnny Winter Down and Dirty, a feature-length documentary that's going to be shown outdoors in the vineyard.
Oh, wow.
So at Deerfield, we've got a big outdoor screen with a brand new digital projection system as well as 35. And so those two venues are really the kind of special places. And we also have a theater in the new place called the Kenwood. It's the Kenwood Restaurant. And we have Kenwood Restaurant Theater Space, it's called.
Fantastic.
And a couple of other little venues from time to time throughout the period. It starts on the 17th of September, goes to the 22nd.
And give us a rundown. You've got several LGBT-themed films that are going to be showing during the festival. Give us a quick hit list of what those films are.
Yeah, we do. We have a terrific film from Sundance that is also one of the closing night films. It's called Drunktown's Finest, and it's directed by Sidney Freeland, who's a Native American, and she grows up in this reservation. And so she's written a film that was so compelling that Robert Redford became the executive producer of the film after it went through its Sundance Labs. And so it's a dramatic film. It has a terrific cast, and the one that is starring in the film is actually transsexual.
Fantastic.
As she is. Yeah. And so it's about three different unusual individuals in the reservation whose stories all kind of come together as they would in Amoris Perros.
All right.
Yeah.
We've just got a little bit of time left.
Okay.
Tell us where people can go to get a full list and see the whole docket for the festival.
Well, they can go to WCFF.us, which is our website. You can also dial in winecountryfilmfest.com, but WCFF.us is the best place, and they can get tickets there, or they can call us for tickets.
Fantastic. And if you missed that website, we'll have it on our own website later tonight at outbeatnews.com. Ron, tell us where we can go to learn more about your documentary.
Well, luckily, the festival has put our trailer on their website, so I believe that the WCFF.us would be the place to go, because if you look up the name of the film, Bobby Jo, Journey of a Singer-Songwriter, our trailer is right there, and so you can get a good idea of what the film is all about, as well as a synopsis. Awesome. And by the way, I might mention that on the 22nd, we'll not only be showing the film, but there'll be a question-and-answer period with Bobby Jo, and Bobby Jo will actually be performing that night as well.
Awesome. Great. And we'll be back with more right after this.
There are more than 2,000 people living with HIV and AIDS in Sonoma County. 500 of them don't know they have it, so neither do their partners. If you've ever suspected you've been exposed to HIV and want to know whether you're carrying the virus that could lead to AIDS, there's a place you can be tested for free, confidentially, and anonymously with results in just 20 minutes. Call face-to-face at 544-1581 or visit f2f.org. We want you to know your status.
And that brings us to the end of our hour. My thanks to our guests tonight, Shane Windmeyer from Campus Pride, and Ron Rogers and Stephen Ashton. I'll be back on the 4th Sunday of September with the next edition of Outbeat News in Depth. Remember, you can follow Outbeat News all month long on Facebook and Twitter and get daily LGBT news headlines from our website at outbeatnews.com. Tune in next Sunday night for Outbeat Radio's Living Proof with Sheridan Gold and Dr. Diana Grayer. That's at 8 p.m. and only here on KRCB Radio, the new 91. In the meantime, have a great week, and thanks for spending your Sunday night with us.
Support for Outbeat Radio on KRCB-FM comes from members and from the North Bay Bohemian, published every Wednesday, celebrating the community, the arts, and the music scene in the North Bay. You'll find them online at bohemian.com. And from General Organics, sustainably produced plant foods and supplements from modern cultivation. General Organics fertilizers are veganic, vegan and organic, produced from botanical extracts and natural minerals for plant nutrition at the molecular level. You'll find them on the web at genhydro.com. You're listening to KRCB-FM Windsor, Santa Rosa, the new 91, with news, new music, and more. This is KRCB. It's just before 9 p.m. Stay with us. Climate One is next.